All right, what's up, everyone? Everyone's Matt Mrozik, and this will be the next work in progress on the four Star Trek Next Generation 1/6 scale vinyl kits from Geometric. That's a mouthful. So everything got prepped, ready for paint. I spent yesterday looking for something for a base, and getting that prepped, we decided to do a teleport or a transporter pad from the show. So I got the files prepped. I've got to clean my printers out and get those printing. The trick is Worf's base has to be bigger than everyone else's because of his stance, so it'll be a bigger base. But I'm going to do all the bases about 6.5 inches in diameter, which means I can print them flat on my transform, which will decrease their print time. So hopefully that'll work out just fine. So I got to clean up my printers today and get those going. But I figured I'd start working on the portraits because that's the first thing I've got to do before I do anything else on the uniforms. So I'm going to start on LaForge here, and let me just reduce my exposure. I'm using my phone to record now, and it tends to overexpose quite a bit. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. So I went ahead and just base coated LaForge and Worf in GarageKits.us medium African flesh. Now, I use the African flesh tones a lot for Caucasian skin too as a base coat. I usually don't go by the name of the color, I just go by what the color is. So I'm going to use this photo as my reference. There's a bunch online, but I think this is the best look to LaForge, depending on, again, when I was doing the first Star Trek kits, it all depended on what photo you looked at to determine skin tones. I think this is the best representation. It looks real natural. I don't see any shifts in color. And the way to tell if you have color shifts is basically like I'm looking at his visor. I know it's silver, and there's no color hue in his visor. There's no greens, there's no blues. So again, depending on which photo you look at, if it's on set, if it's an archival photo that they took to archive the look of the uniforms, whatever, it all depends on what you're looking at. So that's going to be my reference photo for LaForge. So I've got his head base coated, and I have his hands base coated. I then sealed them in Krylon flat finish. So those have dried, and now I can go in and start doing some layering and stuff on his skin. So I think I'm gonna play around here with colors until I get the look. So looking at the photo over here, his skin is very warm because I've used African flesh, but it's got a little bit of red in it. So I'm gonna start out by doing some washes underneath on top of this tone, because this is actually a pretty good starting point for African flesh. It's like any skin tone. There's an infinite variation in skin tones between different people. So not all Caucasians look the same, not all Asians look the same, and vice versa. Worf, I'm going to do him a little darker, not so red in tone. So I'm going to start with some burnt sienna, and this has got a little bit of red in it. If I can get this open. And I'm going to do a little bit of a wash, I think. So I'm going to put some in my cup, add quite a bit of water to it. I'm just going to brush. And I'll do this, everything you see I'll be doing to the hands also, but the portrait will get more details like the lips and all that stuff. So I'm going to start off with this burnt sienna. And it's a little thicker than a wash. And I want to get a. So I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to kind of dab it on. Again, I'm just playing here. I don't have a formula. This is actually the first time I've done an African flesh skin tone. So we'll see how it turns out. It could be disastrous. We never know. So I'm going to go in here and just kind of put it on like this, and I'm going to take a paper towel and just kind of dab. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing with the hands. And I'm going to do oils and stuff too, probably do mostly oils for the shading, but I'm going to get a little kind of undertone going on right now. So my today's goals, we'll see if I want to get at least Lieutenant Worf and LaForge skin tones done. And while those are drying, I can like work on painting the tricorder that LaForge is holding. That's actually going to take a lot of work. There's a ton of details on it. It's a great looking little piece that they put with the kit. There's a bunch of details in it, so it's going to be all hand painted. And I'm just going to put that on, dab it off, and I'll probably do this again as that dries. I think I'm just trying to start establishing some different tones. I may also do this with some red to shift the color a little bit. Some people call this the sideshow method because they do this. They'll put a wash on, they'll use a sponge, and they'll kind of dab it off. And that's how they're getting that kind of realistic imperfections in the skin. Okay, I'm going to hit this with the hair dryer a little bit. Gotta be careful, since this is vinyl, I don't want to hit it too hard. So I'm going to put it on low. And I'm going to hit this again. And since I got mostly water and it dries pretty much right away. This paper towel is just a little damp, so I'm just going here and again, just getting up the excess. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. Once that dries, I'll give you a nice effect, I think. Do the hands again. So I'll do the hands twice in this color, then I'll go seal it. And then I might do a little red. Don't get too much red because I don't want to fight it. Sorry about the dog. Alright, so I did that twice. I'm going to let that dry and I'll seal it and then we'll come back and do another wash. Alright, I went ahead and sealed all that. I just added a little red to that previous burnt sienna. So I kind of got this color going on and I'm going to put that on real lightly. Again, we're going to put it on, dab it off, and just kind of build up some undertones here. He's going to go really red, but that's fine. We're going to counteract that later on. I just want to get some like fleshy look underneath all the tones we're going to put on later. I'm not going to put, I'll just do the red once because it's pretty powerful as far as like the effect I'm getting. I think after this I'll seal it and then I'll go in with the oil and start doing the shading and stuff. But now we kind of got this cool mottled fleshy undertone, which would be a nice base for doing the shading and stuff. Got a little too much right here. I'm just gonna go dampen this Q-tip and blot it off a little bit. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We'll do the hands. Same thing. Gonna go in here and put it on and dab it off. All right, just like that. I'm gonna let this dry. We'll seal it, and then we'll go in with oils and start getting some definition to the sculpt. Okay, so we're gonna start going in with oils and doing some shading and stuff on him. So I made a palette and actually wrote down the colors for you guys. Whoever wants to watch. So these are all the 502 Aptolong oils I've been using. Love them. And I got way more on here than I need, but I can actually use this palette for Worf later and just kind of mix different colors. So I've got light brown, rust, shadow brown, flesh shadow, wash brown, and yellow. So I just put out a bunch of colors. We're going to mix them together and see what we get. So I'm going to start out with, I think, again, LaForge isn't crazy dark. Let me pull up my reference again. Yeah, I would say he's more kind of in this range, and this combined, the flesh shadow and the wash brown combined. I probably won't use the shadow brown. That may be a little too dark, but I am going to start off with the wash brown. And again, I'm just going to take a little bit on my brush here. I don't have any, this is all just straight oil. I don't have any spirits yet, but I'm going to put a little spirit. Some of these oils have been sitting for a while, so they're really dry. So I think I am going to use a little bit of mineral spirits to moisten this, like the wash brown's a little on the dry side, so I'm going to add a little bit of mineral spirits here to make it a little easier to work with. So again, I'm just taking a kind of a pointy brush, and I'm going to start out kind of going along this hairline. And then I got a flat, clean brush. I'm going to start blending that out. Now remember, these go on pretty translucent, so. And when you're working with, let's talk about scale for a second. So I do mostly quarter scale stuff. When you start getting down to a smaller scale, you have to accentuate the contrast, make it more punchy than you normally would. That's why when you see miniature painters, they've got a lot of contrast in their pieces, because you have to do that to show the details. So we're going to bring him up probably a little more punchy than I normally would compared to a quarter scale. It'll just translate better later on. But already, just doing that little shadow around the hairline makes a big difference. Now, he's a pretty young-looking guy here. This sculpt is very young-looking. Actually, all the sculpts are on the younger side. So, I'd mentioned to George Stevenson that, yeah, Riker's the only sculpt to me that looks a little off. And I kind of mentioned it to my client a little bit. And he's like, well, just don't do him if it's off. Well, George had mentioned that, oh, God, what's the name? I forgot the actor's name. He told me that, so they worked directly with the actors when they were releasing these pieces in the 90s on the sculpts, Jonathan Frakes. And he mentioned that Jonathan, they had the sculpt looking a little bit older, and Jonathan wanted it more on the younger side, so that's kind of why he looks the way he does. So I think that's what it is. I think just the sculpt in general is a little too young looking. So I'm going to try to fix that with a little bit of paint. I'm going to bring out his cheekbones a little more, you know, a little more contrast and stuff to kind of help make him look a little, not old, but just a little more mature. And also, it's really hard to see right now, but he does have a beard. You just can't see. It's really hard to see in the sculpt. Okay, so right now I'm just outlining his face in this wash brown. Bring out these lines, so I'm just going to draw a line of oil right there and just soften it up. I'm going to make it pretty dark down here in the V-neck of his uniform. So the uniforms are all going to paint all at the same time, so they're the same, so all the colors match. And then I'll have to take notes, or I'll have this video recording, because my client has a few more of these pieces he wants me to. He's just spreading them out to spread the cost, which I totally understand. And right here along the collar, I'm going to put a pretty good shadow and draw it up. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this flat brush and I'm drawing that shadow up to blend it in. Bring it to the side of his neck here. And I'm going to take a little bit and I'm going to just make a soft shadow down here. I always forget behind the ears. I always usually have to go back and do that because I forget to do it. So he's going to go a little to the dark side. To the dark side. He's going to the dark side first. And then we're going to start adding the highlights and stuff and bringing it back up. But I want to establish my shadows first, because that really brings out the details in the sculpt. So basically I have his head outlined around the hairline and around the ears. Now let's go in here and start bringing out the details around his visor. We'll draw a shadow around the visor. Now he's got some really slightly sculpted in temples right here, so we're going to kind of hit that a little harder. It's pretty subtle, but it's there. And we know they're there anyway. So we're going to bring it out. I'm drawing a line, pretty harsh line right here down from the nose for the cheek line. I'm not sure if my camera's staying in focus, but And just kind of draw a little line around the visor here. And soften it up. Okay. Do on the nose, because the nostrils. Oh, way too much oil. Hopefully you guys are seeing this. I'm trying to be a little more up close. I'm going to hit the center of the lips a little bit. Those will get done later separately, but we can establish some shadows in it already with this. Okay, so for the most part, I've got the shadows established. It's got a pretty soft sculpt, so there's no wrinkles or anything. So now I'm going to go in with the shadow brown, or the flesh shadow, I should say, this color right here, flesh shadow. And we're going to start adding some, I don't know if it's a highlight, but we're going to start maybe mid-tone. I need to bring my camera closer to me so I can see what I'm doing. Right there. So this is the flesh shadow. Put it on and blend it out. And by doing this kind of little stippling motion, you get some nice natural kind of skin texture going on. And hit the tops of the cheeks. Bring it back into the shadow a little bit. So he's dark right now. It's actually pretty close to my reference. Doing those few little washes before I did this really helped, I think, in establishing his overall skin tone. Once I'm done with this, I'll go back and I'll do all the same steps to the hands. I'm just going to use what's on my brush right now for the chin. It's just a little flat right now. It's okay. We're going to add one more highlight to everything. And kind of dry brush the ears a little bit with this. It's actually getting pretty close to my reference. So this color right here is basically like the mid-tone, not the highlight. Okay, I'm gonna put that to the side for now, and I'm gonna bring out the hands and kind of repeat what I did on the face. I'm going with the brown wash. Really hit between the fingers pretty hard. Here he's got a few more wrinkles in his hand, just from holding the tricorder. You hit the wrist pretty hard because that goes back into the cuff of the uniform. This part of the hand you're not going to see. It's got the tricorder in it, but we're going to do it anyway. This tricorder I'm going to permanently attach to his hand. It's kind of like when I did cork, but I didn't use oils on cork. I did it all with acrylics. Okay. Now with the flesh shadow. And it's hard to see while he's still kind of shiny. His face is really dark now. I'm looking at him to go lighten it up quite a bit. Probably go with the light rust maybe. Let's see what that does. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Do the other hand. You know, just doing the same steps, going between the fingers and stuff, bringing out the shadows. So not much to talk about, just hitting the shadows. Anywhere I see a little crease or something, just hit a little bit of oil, a little paint, and tap to blend. Okay. Another shadow. That's the trick when you're trying to match a person that's actually alive, is trying to get the match as close as possible. Man, there's some painters out there that just blow my mind with their skin tones. They're like freaking unreal. Okay, yeah. He's dark overall, but it's okay. We can bring him up. Okay, let's go back to the face. Let's see what I need to do. I think I need to go. It's light brown rust. Let's add a little spirits to this. I may add a little yellow to this to brighten it up. So this is light brown rust. Start slowly bringing up the highlights. Now we're getting somewhere. Got a little too much on there. We're gonna try to blend it out. Alright, so I'm going to keep doing this for a while until I get what I want, because this could take a while, but I'm just going to go in here with this light brown rust to bring up the tones and start blending things in a little bit better. And then we'll go from there. I'll probably go in with one more highlight, and that will probably get us pretty close to where we want to be. Alright, so I went with the kind of the yellow. I mixed a little bit of yellow with the light rust, and I added a little bit of a highlight to her. Now I'm going to go in with, I'm going to go back to, I added basic flesh, which is pretty bright, but we're going to mix it in with a little bit of this light brown rust, and hopefully that'll be our last highlight on him to brighten him up overall. So I got this kind of tone right here. Again, my phone is overexposing, so hopefully I can change it in when I process these. So we're going to go in here. And this is pretty bright compared to everything else. I'm going to put a little dab here, right here on the top of his forehead. Like that. Start blending that in. Let's continue to bring it up until we get a nice bright highlight. I might just add a little bit of that basic flesh by itself too. Because again, you're seeing all the layers underneath. From the previous steps. Because this is going on really thin. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So on the forehead, we just added that kind of brighter highlight. So I can't show you, but what I'm doing right now is with this brush, this flat brush, I'm putting more pressure on the top bristles and less press. So I'm hitting mostly with these top bristles here, and which is causing that to fade down just kind of naturally with the way I'm putting pressure on the brush. So I'm not using the whole brush, I'm just using really those top bristles, and as I push it, just kind of naturally fades it down. And then you can also brush it down a little bit like this to blend. Same here with the chin, using just to kind of really pushing pressure on the top part of the bristles and letting it, the rest of it kind of fade down. Not too much oil in there, so I'm just going to kind of dry brush the ears a little bit with that. I haven't done the hands yet. I'll go back and do the hands after I show you this. Yeah, it's looking pretty good now. Actually, we're getting really close here, I think. I'll put my reference again. Yeah, it may be a little darker on my reference photo, but I think the skin tone is pretty close. Looking pretty good, I think. I can always go back in and bring out the shadows a little bit more. Add a little more of the shadow tone. So I'm just adding just a little bit more of the shadow color, the wash brown, back in. Got one more little kind of bright highlight on the nose, on the chin. Two little bright highlights right there on the forehead, blend them out. Again, with this scale, we need to bring up the contrast pretty big. I'm going a little brighter than I'm going to go back to the shadow color and bring it back into the forehead. And this will darken down a little bit after I seal it. Paint always darkens down after it dries. I'm going to blend a little bit more of this stuff in here with the light brown. This is light brown rust. It's going to smooth out some of the texture. It's hard to tell, but I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, I'll let that dry. And hit the hands a little bit with some highlights. That's too much. All right, we'll have to bring that down here in a second. And I can blend it out. Let's see. Maybe okay. Thought I put too much on there. So yeah, for the skin tones, I'm using a lot of Caucasian skin tones too, not just browns. This is pretty bright Caucasian tone, but it's good for a highlight. And plus you're blending it all back into the previous color, so it works well. It looks pretty good. Let's do the other hand, and then I'll hit these with the let these dry for a while before I seal them. Just in the tops of the knuckles on his hands and blending it out. Like the tips of the fingers. too much. I'm just going to blend this out because I got too much on there. Can always go back to the mid-tone. The shadow. I'm just using what's on my brush here to kind of get everything blended together. Got a little too much highlight on there, so I'm just going to add a little bit more of the mid-tone back on top. Tone it down a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Okay, so I need to let this dry for, I don't know, an hour or so, and I can seal it. Trying a little highlight on top of the lips here. Yeah, don't put too much on. That looks weird. I'm gonna go back with the mid-tone a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to keep playing with this, and we'll seal it, and we'll come back and see how it looks. Alright, so I wait for LaForge to dry a little bit. I'm working on Worf, and for him I didn't do any washes beforehand. I'm just going in, and I'm using the shadow brown, and I'm just bringing out all the details in this sculpt. So there's the head so far. In the same process, just dab it on and blend it out. I'm not showing a lot of this because it's going to be the same process. So I'm going to do this on the hands, and then I'll put it on the next color. Okay, so next step on Worf is I hit it with the hair dryer and I sealed them, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush some of this light brown rust on. And I'm just, again, just like you normally dry brush, you load up your brush with some paint, you take most of it off. And then we're just kind of dry brush. He's got these great details in his head and stuff, and I sealed this because I didn't want to mess up all the shadow work I did. So I'm going to slowly just kind of build up this tone on top of this, and this might get me pretty damn close to where I want to be with the skin. So the reference I'm using, his skin is a little bit on the greener side. By dry brushing, we maintain all the shadows I did pretty well. His sculpt is pretty harsh, a lot of harsh details, so we're going to bring those out. Just like that. I'm going to slowly build it up. It's looking pretty damn good. because he's got a little green, a little bit of red, kind of. Again, it all depends on which picture you look at. I'm looking at basically the same kind of picture that I'm using for the Forge, where he's kind of gets just a star background. That's looking pretty damn good. And do the same thing to his hands. It'd be hard to show you here, but because since his arms are attached, it's hard to show you what I'm doing, but I'm just, again, dry brushing with that light brown rust. It's hard to paint these while they're on the figure. I wish they were separate like the Forges were. It'd be like this on all the figures, unfortunately. That's looking pretty good. His fingernails will get done. I have to look at what color his fingernails go. That's looking pretty good. Let's look at his face again. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to hit this with a hair dryer. I'm going to seal it again and maybe add one more highlight. Okay, so Worf is looking really, really good. So the last thing I'm going to do on him is I mixed up a little bit of light. It's kind of a mixture of everything. A little light brown rust, a little bit of basic flesh, a little bit of yellow, and a little bit of shadow flesh. And I've got this color right here. And I'm dry brushing that just on the very tops of, like, I'm putting it on his bottom eyelids. Just to bring out some more, just very, 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 very lightly. And I sealed this, just going in here, just kind of hitting his eyelids a little bit, top of the nose, very, very lightly, top of the cheek. Again, it's just kind of dry brushing this on and bringing that down a little bit. This is super, super light. I'm gonna hit the top of his head here just a little bit. right here in the middle. And that's probably it. So I think that looks pretty damn good. And once I put the hair in, which will be the next step, which is basically just, it's actually very, very dark brown. It's not black, depending on how you look at it. But we'll base coat it in black and then do all our normal stuff, dry brushing. Bring out this little detail in his head right here. A little bit. All right, I think that's looking pretty damn good. And Cammy's looking pretty yellow for some reason. I don't know why, but in person he looks really, really good. I'm gonna do this to the hands just a little bit, and then I'm gonna seal everything. All right, I just sealed Geordi. He's the sealer's drying. For Worf, I've base coated the hair in black. I'm working on base coating the eyes in a kind of an off gray kind of color. And once those are done, I'm going to dry brush the hair with some brown because it's actually kind of a dark brown, and just add the highlights to the hair. Then the eyes are actually sculpted very nicely. So I'll probably put a decal on them, and then we'll see about, but his eyes are brown. They're dark brown. They almost look completely black, but they're not. They're dark brown, so I'll put some brown eyes in them. And we're actually getting pretty close to having Worf's portrait done. Here's Geordi's portrait after I sealed it. Looking pretty good. Pretty happy with that. The only thing I do on his are the lips. And I do the lips usually in an acrylic. So I'm going to continue working on Worf's eyes, getting those base coated. And I'll show you dry brushing the hair. Okay, so for Worf's hair, I'm going to dry brush some burnt umber on. Start with that, and then see if we need to lighten up from there. Got my reference photo over here. It's kind of dark brown. We start with the black, so we're just going to go in here and start bringing this up. And we might bring it up a little lighter than you normally would just because of the scale again. I'm actually kind of go this way a little bit with the two. Go with the hair a little bit too, just to line it up overall just a little bit, so it's not just doesn't look black, because his hair is not black. It's dark brown. See a little spot here that I missed with the. I missed a little spot of black, so I'm gonna go back there and just touch it up real quick. Sometimes you see that later, right there. Let's blend it back in with the burnt umber. I work right in my lap a lot of times. It's easy to work that way. Makes it hard to film. Then you're just looking at my crotch. It's actually looking pretty good. Do his beard. I'll probably bring it up one more level. Hit the eyebrows just a little bit. Q-tip here gets the excess off. Okay, I think I'm going to bring this up one more level. Into that, I'm going to add raw emerald green. I don't know if I want to put green in there. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of white to that. So just a tiniest bit of white to the burnt umber. Use the flat part of the brush. And that's going to get me right where I want. Sorry, I'm kind of going off camera a little bit. Go one more level up. Again, just add just a hair more bit of white. Just really hitting the kind of tops of these folds in his hair because there's some dimensions sculpted in there. and that'll dry down perfectly. Just really lightly hitting the eyebrows. I think that looks pretty damn good. At the top of the head a little bit, so that'd be the brightest spot. Staying away from the hairline. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Once I seal that, that should look really nice. So I think the hair is done. We'll seal this. I'll put some eyeballs in them. Alright, so I just put the eyeball decals in on Worf, and it's great because the eyeballs are sculpted in really nicely, so I got the placement right where the sculpt is. I'll wait for the solve set to dry, and then I'm going to, I'll seal it, and I'll do some painting on them, and do the eyeline, the waterline and stuff like that. And then after the eyes are done, last thing I'll do is I'll coat the lips a little bit with some acrylic to pinken them up. And then his portrait's pretty close, so I'm gonna let the eyes dry for a while the setting solution does its thing. And then on LaForge, I went ahead and dry brushed his hair just a little bit. I mean, it's pretty much black on him, but I wanted to do a little highlight, so I just dry brushed a little bit of raw umber just to give it some highlights. It's pretty subtle. Now what I can do is I can paint his visor. So I'm going to pull up a picture of his visor. And this is good, all hand painted. Okay, so it's pretty simple. There's it's silver with some like brass. The center is like basically, so the outside's silver, the inside is basically gold or brass, and this is the same color there. So we'll paint the whole thing silver first. So let me find a good color for that. Actually, if I can have, I think, pale note. It's like the perfect tone. I don't want silver. I've got a great metallic if I have any left. Not chrome. Not burnt. I might have to mix one. It's just got a little bit of warmth to it. I think I'm out. Crap. Okay, so I'm going to mix one. So I'm going to take a little bit of... I'm just going to mix something up here in my palette for the outside. So I'm going to take a little gold. Let's find a place where the paint's dry. A little gold. I'll keep that out for the... And a little, where is it? Burnt iron. Let's see what that looks like. It's gonna be too dark. That's okay. We're gonna brighten it up. I have to clean that brush. Okay, so this is gold and burnt iron. Now I'm gonna add some silver to this so I get the brightness I want. I just want silver. I wanna make it a little nicer. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take some of the silver over here. Now let's mix up way more than I need. Gonna add some of this to the silver to warm it up just a hair. That looks pretty good. So I'm gonna paint most of this off camera because I got my Optivisor on, but we're just gonna go in here and we're gonna paint this guy silver, and then we'll seal it and then paint the inside. Okie dokie. So I got Worf's and Jodie's portraits done, and I think they look really good. Worf is looking nice and menacing. Nice job there, I think. So we pinkened up the lips a little bit, put a little satin finish on those. Jodie's visor, I went in and I did a little bit of a brown wash on it just to kind of bring out some of the details in it. But I think that looks really good. So yeah, those two portraits are done. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to work on probably the tricorder for Geordi and maybe Worf's weapon, whatever thing is called. I'm not sure. But the tricorder is going to take quite a while, so I'll probably do that next. It's right here. It's got to have a lot of hand painting done on this guy, all those little buttons and everything. So I got to get up a reference photo for it, and do that next. So not sure how much of that I'll show on camera. I may just call this work in progress done because this is a pretty big step getting these portraits done. Let's put Geordi's hands on so you can see what that looks like. Come on. That's going to go there. You can see I did the fingernails. I have just kind of a little fleshy tone to those. And his arm. So there we go. Yeah, I think those look pretty sharp. So I'm going to send a photo to my client and see what he says. Hopefully he likes them because this was a full day getting these two portraits done, but they look really good, I think. So stay tuned for the next work in progress where I'll probably do Data and Riker's portraits in their skin tones. And then that'll take a full day to do. It usually takes me about half a day to do one portrait. So this is taking me a full day to do these two guys just because of all the different layers and stuff. But really happy with them. And stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.